For thousands of years, an island deep in the Indian Ocean has remained untouched by the outside world. Its people, the Sentinelese, live in complete isolation, rejecting contact with modern civilization. They do not trade, they do not communicate, and they fiercely defend their land from any outsiders. Their origins remain one of the greatest mysteries of human history. Who are they? Where did they come from? Unlike many indigenous groups that have interacted with the world, the Sentinelese have remained completely uncontacted, preserving an ancient way of life that has likely remained unchanged for tens of thousands of years. Scientists have long speculated about their genetic lineage, but due to their hostile stance towards visitors, their DNA has never been directly studied. This has led researchers to examine other related Andamanese tribes to piece together the puzzle of their origins. What they found is astonishing. The Sentinelese, along with other indigenous Andamanese groups, carry some of the oldest surviving human genetic markers, tracing back to the very first migrations out of Africa over 70,000 years ago. This makes them one of the most genetically distinct populations on Earth. But how did they end up in the middle of the Indian Ocean? What makes their DNA so unique? And what can their genetic isolation reveal about the ancient human past? In this video, we uncover the hidden genetic origins of the Sentinelese, exploring their deep ancestry, their evolutionary adaptations, and the scientific and ethical dilemmas surrounding the study of one of the last uncontacted peoples on the planet. The Sentinelese are believed to be direct descendants of some of the earliest modern humans who migrated out of Africa. Genetic studies on related Andamanese tribes, such as the Anj and the Jarwa, suggest that their ancestors left Africa approximately 70,000 years ago, making them one of the oldest continuous human populations on Earth. During this period, early humans followed a coastal migration route, traveling along the shores of South Asia before reaching Southeast Asia and eventually the Andaman Islands. The rising sea levels at the end of the last ice age isolated the Andaman Islands, cutting off these ancient populations from further contact with the outside world. Over thousands of years, they became genetically and culturally distinct, forming a lineage that has remained almost completely unaltered. Scientists have identified genetic markers in other indigenous Andamanese groups that are entirely unique compared to the rest of the world's populations. These markers indicate that their ancestors split off from other human groups tens of thousands of years ago, making them one of the most isolated human lineages. This extreme isolation has led to a genetic drift that has preserved ancient DNA traits that have disappeared from other populations. Despite their physical resemblance to some African populations, the Sentinelese are not closely related to any modern African groups. Instead, their genetic profile aligns more closely with the ancient Aboriginal populations of Southeast Asia and Australia. This has led researchers to suggest that they are a remnant of a much older human migration, separate from later waves that populated the Indian subcontinent. One of the most remarkable aspects of their genetics is their resistance to genetic mixing. Unlike many indigenous groups that have experienced some level of genetic interbreeding over the centuries, the Sentinelese have remained in near total isolation. This has preserved their unique genetic identity, making them a living window into the deep human past. But how have they survived in isolation for so long? And what evolutionary adaptations have helped them thrive in the harsh conditions of their island home? In the next section, we explore the incredible biological traits that have allowed the Sentinelese to endure for tens of thousands of years. Surviving in total isolation for tens of thousands of years is no small feat. The Sentinelese have lived without modern technology, external trade, or contact with the outside world. Yet they have thrived in their remote island environment. This raises an important question. How have they adapted biologically and culturally to survive in such extreme isolation? One of the most striking biological adaptations of the Sentinelese and other indigenous Andamanese tribes is their short stature. On average, Sentinelese men stand about 5 feet 150 centimeters tall, a characteristic known as island dwarfism. This phenomenon occurs in isolated environments where food resources are limited, leading to smaller body sizes over generations to conserve energy. This trait has been observed in other island populations, such as the pygmies of Central Africa, suggesting that their bodies have evolved to be more energy efficient in resource-scarce environments. Another key adaptation is their immune system, or rather, their lack of immunity to common diseases. Because they have remained isolated for so long, the Sentinelese have never been exposed to many pathogens that exist in the modern world. Unlike populations that have developed immunity through centuries of disease exposure, the Sentinelese are highly vulnerable to even mild illnesses, such as the common cold or flu. This is why anthropologists and researchers avoid direct contact. Introducing foreign pathogens to their community could be devastating. Beyond their biology, the Sentinelese have mastered survival techniques that allow them to live off their island's limited resources. They are hunter-gatherers, relying on fishing, hunting wild animals, and collecting fruits and tubers. Unlike other Andamanese tribes, they do not practice agriculture or store food. Instead, they have developed an intimate knowledge of their environment, knowing exactly where and when to find food throughout the year. One of their most fascinating adaptations is their advanced archery skills. The Sentinelese are known to be extremely skilled with bows and arrows, capable of defending their territory with incredible accuracy. Their bows are unique, longer than the height of an average adult, giving them greater power and range. They even modify their arrows for different purposes, such as hunting or defense. Despite living on an island, the Sentinelese appear to have an aversion to open water. Unlike many island-dwelling groups that develop seafaring skills, there is no evidence that the Sentinelese use boats or attempt to travel beyond their shores. This suggests they have adapted to life on land, possibly due to the dangers of open sea travel or cultural taboos against venturing into deep waters. Their ability to survive without modern tools, farming, or external support is a testament to the effectiveness of their traditional knowledge and adaptability. However, this isolation has also made them highly vulnerable. Any disruption, whether through disease, climate change, or accidental contact, could threaten their entire way of life. Throughout history, many isolated groups have eventually come into contact with the outside world, often with disastrous consequences. But the Sentinelese have remained one of the few peoples who have successfully resisted external influence. Why have they fought so hard to remain isolated? And what can history teach us about their encounters with outsiders? The first recorded contact attempt with the Sentinelese dates back to the late 19th century, when British naval officer Maurice Vidal Portman led an expedition to the island. Portman and his men abducted an elderly couple and several children, hoping to civilize them. The couple soon died from exposure to foreign illnesses, and the children, likely sick, were sent back to their island. This incident may have shaped the tribe's deep-seated distrust of outsiders. Over the decades, there were sporadic attempts to establish peaceful contact. In the 1970s and 1990s, Indian anthropologists tried to befriend the Sentinelese by leaving gifts such as coconuts, pigs, and iron tools. While some items were accepted, others, like pigs and dolls, were rejected, sometimes violently. The Sentinelese often responded with hostility, firing arrows at approaching boats and helicopters. One of the most famous encounters occurred in 2006, when two fishermen illegally ventured too close to the island. They were killed, and their bodies were left on the beach as a warning. When Indian authorities attempted to retrieve the bodies using a helicopter, they were met with arrows, forcing them to abandon the mission. In 2018, American missionary John Allen Chow illegally entered Sentinel Island in an attempt to convert the tribe to Christianity. He left behind notes suggesting he was trying to befriend them, but the Sentinelese shot him with arrows and buried his body in the sand. His death reignited debates over whether uncontacted tribes should be left alone or integrated into modern society. These incidents highlight an important truth. The Sentinelese are not merely an isolated group. They are an actively defensive society, determined to protect their way of life at all costs. Given the tragic fate of other indigenous groups who were exposed to colonization, disease, and cultural destruction, their hostility may be a strategy of survival. The Indian government has since enforced strict laws banning all contact with the Sentinelese. The island is now protected, with the Indian Navy patrolling the waters to prevent unauthorized access. This ensures that the Sentinelese remain untouched, allowing them to live as they have for thousands of years. But how long can they continue this resistance? As modern technology advances and external pressures increase, their future remains uncertain. One of the biggest mysteries surrounding the Sentinelese is their genetic makeup. Given their isolation for tens of thousands of years, their DNA holds valuable clues about human migration, evolution, and adaptation. However, because they reject outside contact, there are no direct genetic studies on the Sentinelese. Scientists can only infer their genetic origins by studying related Andamanese tribes, such as the Anj, Jarwa, and Great Andamanese. Genetic research on these tribes has revealed stunning insights. Their DNA suggests they are descendants of one of the earliest human migrations out of Africa, dating back between 50,000 to 70,000 years ago. This makes them one of the most ancient, continuous populations in the world. One of the most significant genetic markers found in Andamanese populations is their connection to the first wave of modern humans who reached Asia. Their genetic lineage is distinct from later migrants who populated much of South and East Asia. This means that while other populations mixed and adapted over thousands of years, the Sentinelese and their Andamanese relatives remain genetically isolated. Another fascinating discovery is their genetic resistance to certain diseases. Some studies on the Anj and Jarwa show unique immune system adaptations that help them survive in their tropical environment. However, this same isolation makes them dangerously vulnerable to outside illnesses, which is one of the biggest threats to their survival. Perhaps the most intriguing aspect of Sentinelese genetics is what we don't know. Since we don't have direct DNA samples, it's possible they could harbor genetic traits unseen in any other human population. Could they have unique adaptations that help them survive extreme isolation? Could they have genetic links to other lost human groups? Scientists may never get answers to these questions unless the Sentinelese voluntarily engage with the outside world. But for now, their DNA remains an untapped well of information, holding secrets that could reshape our understanding of early human history. For thousands of years, the Sentinelese have lived untouched by the modern world. But in today's age of rapid globalization, can they continue to remain isolated forever? With increasing environmental changes, geopolitical pressures, and illegal intrusions, their future hangs in the balance. One of the biggest concerns is climate change. North Sentinel Island, like much of the Andaman and Nicobar archipelago, is vulnerable to rising sea levels, unpredictable storms, and ecological shifts. While the Sentinelese have survived natural disasters in the past, including the devastating 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami, rising ocean levels could permanently alter their food sources and way of life. As marine ecosystems change, will they be able to sustain their traditional diet of fish, fruits, and small game? Another looming threat is illegal poaching and fishing. Despite India's strict laws protecting the island, some fishermen venture too close in search of valuable marine resources. These illegal intrusions put the Sentinelese at risk of violent encounters and exposure to deadly diseases. A single virus or bacteria, such as the flu or measles, could devastate their population, as they lack immunity to common illnesses that the rest of the world has long adapted to. There is also the question of government intervention. While the Indian government currently enforces a strict no-contact policy, history has shown that political priorities can shift. What happens if future administrations decide to integrate the Sentinelese into modern society? Similar attempts with other Andamanese tribes, such as the Great Andamanese and the Anj, have led to catastrophic population declines, loss of traditional knowledge, and cultural destruction. If forced assimilation were ever attempted, the consequences for the Sentinelese could be irreversible. On the other hand, some argue that their isolation is not sustainable in the long term. Proponents of controlled contact believe that gradual exposure could help them adapt to modern threats while preserving their identity. Others believe that technological advancements, such as satellite surveillance and drone-based studies, could allow us to learn more about them without direct interference. Despite these challenges, the Sentinelese have proven themselves to be remarkably resilient. They have resisted invaders, adapted to environmental changes, and defended their land for centuries. Their fierce independence suggests that, for now, they will continue to fight for their isolation, as long as they have a means to do so. But the question remains, how long can they hold out? In a world that is rapidly shrinking, where the reach of modern civilization extends to even the most remote corners, the fate of the Sentinelese stands as a test of humanity's ability to respect the last truly uncontacted people on Earth. As we conclude, we must ask ourselves, Should we seek to uncover their secrets, or should we let them remain as they have always been, free, untouched, and sovereign over their own destiny? The Sentinelese remain one of the last uncontacted peoples on Earth, and their genetic isolation presents both scientific curiosity and ethical dilemmas. Researchers speculate that their DNA holds clues to human migration patterns, ancient adaptations, and unique genetic markers that have been preserved for thousands of years. However, studying their genetics comes with significant challenges. One major concern is disease susceptibility. Since the Sentinelese have been isolated for so long, they likely lack immunity to many common illnesses. Past encounters with indigenous groups worldwide have shown how devastating outside diseases can be to isolated populations. Any direct genetic study would require extreme caution to prevent introducing pathogens that could wipe out their entire community. Another ethical issue is consent. The Sentinelese have made it clear for centuries that they do not wish to interact with outsiders. Conducting genetic studies without their consent would violate fundamental ethical principles in anthropology and genetics. While some researchers suggest analyzing environmental DNA, such as hair or footprints left behind, this approach still raises concerns about respecting their autonomy. Despite these barriers, Sentinelese genetics could provide valuable insights into early human migration and adaptation. If studied responsibly, their DNA could help scientists understand how ancient humans survived in isolated conditions and adapted to specific environmental pressures. Additionally, it could shed light on their relationship to other Andamanese tribes, such as the Anj and Jarwa, who share some linguistic and genetic similarities. Ultimately, the Sentinelese people are a living testament to human resilience and survival. Their genetic story, though largely unknown, remains a vital chapter in humanity's past. While science may one day uncover more about their origins, the ethical priority should always be respecting their sovereignty and right to remain undisturbed.